Manuel, the mayor of Chicago, looked down at the 100-year-old water pipes that his city rested upon. These water pipes are old, decayed, and basically worthless. Though, I don't know, you decide for yourself, they only sprang about 3,800 leaks in 2011 alone. Unfortunately, this problem in Chicago is not only in Chicago. In fact, we're seeing situations like this rise up all over America, recently Flint, Michigan. The infrastructure crisis in the United States is rising to an epidemic proportion, and yet if we look around, there's really nothing being done to solve the problem, which is why I've chosen to examine the editorial by the New York Times, which specifically looks at a solution to the infrastructure crisis today. And while I do agree that there is a huge problem with the United States infrastructure, today I'm going to disagree with the solution presented by the editorial board of the New York Times, which was that we need to increase the gas tax either on the national or state level. And I'd like to disagree with this for two reasons. The first is because the gas tax is soon going to become obsolete, and the second is because it's an unrealistic change. So let's jump right into my first point. Why exactly is the gas tax going to become obsolete in the near future? The first reason is because gas consumption is only going to decrease. According to an article from the Texas Transportation Institute in 2011, we've got all of these federal policies toward decreasing fuel consumption. But when you drive down fuel consumption, you drive down the revenue base. What are you going to do when the vehicle fleet looks completely different from the way it does now? End quote. I'd like to break this article down, or this quote, into two different segments. The first, looking at federal policies. Essentially, right now, the United States government is shooting themselves in the foot because they're asking Americans to stop consuming so much fuel, and yet at the same time, the way that the government pays for our roads and our bridges and our dams is from the fuel that we consume. And so, in the United States, we've consumed less and less fuel over the years, and that's not going to change in the future. In fact, we're still going to be seeing a decrease in fuel consumption, which means that even if you do raise the gas tax, it's still not going to become enough money to fix the infrastructure crisis, because at the end of the day, we are only driving away from fuel and not driving toward more fuel. The second part of this quote talks about how the vehicle fleet is going to look different. What does that mean? Well, we're already seeing an increase of electronically run vehicles, and I predict in the future, 50 to 60 years, almost the entire vehicle fleet will be these electric cars. What does that mean? It means that they don't run on gas. So essentially, the gas tax is going to be an archaic form of the government trying to pay for our infrastructure, which is ultimately going to fail because we're not going toward more gas as a society, we're going toward less gas. So we have to find an alternate means of increasing the money for our infrastructure. The gas tax is going to become obsolete. The second reason why I don't think that the gas tax is going to be an effective solution is because it's already not been passed in Congress. Essentially, on both the national and state level, it's failed to be a thing that people want to vote for. Specifically looking at the national level, The Economist in 2013 talked about how Congress does not want to increase taxes because they want to be reelected. People don't like it when taxes are raised, and so therefore they don't vote again for the congressmen who raise their taxes. They want to stay in office, and so therefore they don't increase taxes. Another problem with increasing the gas tax on a national level is that it doesn't produce meaningful reform. Infrastructure is kind of like education. It needs to come from the states because the states know what their constituents need the best. The reason why it's going to fail on the state level, looking at my second subpoint, is because kind of the same reason. According to the governing in 2015, they said, but legislators who tinker with gas taxes risk political backlash. It's also unsuccessful unless it's been implemented by all states. And specifically, the editorial board of the New York Times discusses this when they look at the example of New Jersey and New York and Pennsylvania. New York and Pennsylvania have both increased their gas tax. And so when the gas tax was increased, those residents went and bought their gas from New Jersey, which did not increase their gas tax. And so, while they do get more revenue in theory, New York and Pennsylvania, because they have an increased gas tax, since all of their residents are going to Pennsylvania to buy their gas, it ended up being a very unsuccessful implementation because if all the states do it, it will be successful. But since all the states aren't going to do it, it's not going to be successful. At the end of the day, if we look specifically at Chicago or Flint, Michigan, we see that there's a huge crisis in the United States that has to be resolved. But unfortunately, raising the gas tax is not the way to do that.